Hello, I'm Ninja Greg, and you're watching the Ninja Greg Show. And this is my review of Despicable Me 3, or as I like to call it, Despicable 3. Alright, let me quickly bring you up to speed if you haven't seen the first two movies. Despicable Me 1. Supervillain Gru is setting out to pull off the crime of the century by stealing first a shrink ray that he can later use to steal the moon. But there's a slight problem. The shrink ray needed to, shrink down the moon ends up being stolen by a newer villain named Vector, and the shrink ray gets held at his fortress. So Gru tries in vain to try and steal the shrink ray. But then when he sees three orphan girls successfully enter the fortress by selling cookies, Gru gets the idea to use the girls to try and steal the shrink ray and put his ultimate plan into action. And of course we've got, Gru at first being kind of standoffish with them and not really wanting anything to do with them because he just sees them as a means to an end. But of course they end up bonding over mutual interests. And, Gru decides to put his kind of more villainous desires on the back burner because he now cares about these girls more than stealing the moon or being regarded as the world's greatest supervillain. And it's really just a fun, cute kind of movie, and yeah, this was the movie that kind of started the inevitable Minion craze. But because this is the first one, the Minions really aren't too bad in this because, we're just getting introduced to them in this. But, Minions aside, it's still a fun, enjoyable enough movie. I can highly recommend this one. Moving on to the sequel, Despicable Me 2. Now, former villain Gru is trying to live as simple a life as a former supervillain can with his now 3 adopted daughters, when one day he is recruited by the Anti-Villain League, or the AVL, to try and find out who is the villainous mastermind behind a stolen mutagenic chemical. So Gru and his new AVL agent partner, Lucy Wilde, they go undercover to try and find out who's been stealing the PX40 mutagenic chemical. And, like with Gru and the girls in the first one, the two of them get close, and we kind of see the beginnings of a bit of a romance between them. And they end up getting married by the end of the film. And yeah, this one's just as fun, just as funny, still cute, still enjoyable enough. There is a little bit more of the Minions antics in this, but that's a sequel, that's to be expected. And again, they're not too bad, and some moments with them are genuinely funny. And then after that, because the Minions were so incredibly popular, thank you Universal and Illumination Entertainment, we of course got the Minion movie, which has absolutely no bearing on this movie, so we're just moving on to Despicable Me 3. Okay, so in this movie, we're faced with a new supervillain named Balthazar Bratt, who's a former child star turned bitter against Hollywood because his show, in which he played a child evil genius called Evil Brat, his show ended up being canceled because, well, what do you know? Kids grow up. So yeah, after he hit puberty and got all awkward like how a teenager gets, no one wanted to watch his show anymore, and so now he's set out to basically reenact an old episode of his show and just lay waste to Hollywood. And while Gru does succeed in preventing Brat from stealing a diamond that's integral to his plan, which we later find out that the diamond he stole is actually a fake, Brat himself actually ends up getting away, and this costs both Gru and Lucy their jobs with the AVL, so things kind of look bad for our kind of villain turned hero. But then he finds out something interesting. He's got a long lost twin brother named Drew who wants to get Gru back into villainy, but Gru says, no, I've sworn off that life. I don't want to go back. But Drew really wants to be a great supervillain like Gru was. So he tries his best to try and convince Gru to get back into villainy, because it's, apparently they've got this whole family history of everyone in their family being this great master criminal, and Drew just wants to be like one of them. And Gru kind of gives in to Drew's plan, but he's got his own motivation. In a scene where we see Balthazar Brat successfully steal the real diamond, Gru comes up with a plan to kind of use Drew's tech and his need to be a villain to steal the real diamond from Balthazar Brat, with the intent of giving it to the AVL and getting him and Lucy's job back. And of course we got the kind of the disappointment where Drew's feels lied to and used by Gru, which he kind of was, and they kind of have their big blowout, and they mope about it for a little bit. But then they come back together when Balthazar Brat kind of kidnaps Gru and Lucy's daughters in exchange for the diamond, so that he can enact his plan. And they put their differences aside to bring down the big threat. And it is a slightly predictable movie, but it's still fun. I definitely had a good time watching this. Now there is a kind of a somewhat stupid and doesn't really pay off very well subplot about the minions wanting to go back to villainy, and when they don't get what they want, because Gru says we're definitely not going back to villainy, I've given up that life. Like the bunch of children they are, they run away from home. And unlike actual children who run away from home only to come back an hour later, the minions, thanks to their own bottomless stupidity, end up in jail, and while in jail they realize, oh, darn it, we actually kind of miss Gru. I mean, we know we were mad at him because he wouldn't let us go back to doing what we were good at, but gosh darn it, we just miss him too much. So they break out of jail, and Convenience Fairy must have been watching this movie, because we have the convenience of all conveniences when, Gru and the minions meet up at a very integral part of the movie and kind of play a bit of a part in stopping Balthazar Brat and rescuing the girls and whatnot. So yeah, it does feel a little bit contrived, but nevertheless, the majority of the movie is still pretty fun. It's Despicable Me 3. You should know very well what you're getting by this point. But yeah, I highly recommend all three of these movies. They're all fun, they're all cute, they're all funny. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about this one. Anyways, I'm Ninja Greg. You've been watching The Ninja Greg Show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell for notifications so you know when I put up something new up. I'll see you next time.